Karen Gilbert turned my land into a nightclub. That sentence haunted me the moment it left my mouth at the police station. No less, where even the officer behind the glass couldn't suppress a half smirk. But I meant every word. It wasn't hyperbole. She really did it. A woman with 3 poodles, a homeowners association presidency, and a platinum visor somehow managed to convert the fragile dune ecosystem behind my house into a full-scale foam-covered beach rave, and no one stopped her. Not the whore, not the police, not even the goddamn zoning board. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how this absurd, incandescent nightmare began, you have to know what it used to be like. Peaceful. That's the word. Not just quiet but serene. I'd lived by this beach for 31 years. My wife and I bought the house when our youngest left for college. Back then, the shoreline was just that, shoreline. Not a space to be monetized, advertised, or converted into a circus. The dunes, as fragile as lace and just as intricate, had been protected by local ordinance for decades. Every year, the loggerhead turtles would return to nest in the moonlight. We'd watch them from the deck with binoculars and cocoa, whispering so as not to disturb their ancient ritual. That land wasn't just mine on paper, it was sacred, which is why when Karen Gilbert moved in, I didn't expect anything more than some mismatched curtains or an unfortunate mailbox makeover. I didn't expect war. The first sign should have been the Hoa newsletter. Karen had recently appointed herself president unopposed, naturally, since nobody really paid attention to those elections, and in her debut issue, she declared a vision for a vibrant, engaged, beach-loving community. Sounds harmless, right, until you read the fine print. She wanted shared access to previously underutilized dune spaces, a monthly community gathering, and my favorite, a glow-on-the-beach summer kickoff event. I reread that line 5 times. Glow like what? Bracelets, candles. I hadn't even heard of a glow party before. My wife Googled it and recoiled. Foam machines, neon lights, DJs, at night, on dunes protected by state and federal environmental law. I walked outside, half expecting to see it had all just been a prank, but the dune was real. The ordinance markers were still there, and it was still my land. A week later, Karen knocked on my door. She wore a pink visor and carried a clipboard as if that gave her federal authority. "Hi Duke," she said, like we were old friends. "Just letting you know. The Hoa approved the beach event for July 4th weekend. We'll need access through your gate to set up the foam machine. It's just temporary. And the community is so excited." I told her, as evenly as I could, that I never approved any event, and that her Hoa didn't have jurisdiction over my private property. "Oh," she said, tapping her clipboard, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." There hadn't. She was testing me. I said no, politely, firmly. She smiled the way people smile when they're already texting a lawyer. I should have taken a photo right then and there. The weeks that followed were eerily quiet. Too quiet. No more newsletters, no meetings, no updates. But one afternoon, I noticed a man walking along the dune, measuring tape in hand, muttering into a headset. I called out. He said he was contracted by the HOA for infrastructure planning. I said this was private land, and he was trespassing. He replied, "You'll have to take that up with Karen." That night, I installed 2 motion-sensitive cameras on my deck, and one in a camouflaged perch near the dune line. My wife rolled her eyes, but I told her I want proof, just in case. The first break-in came 3 nights later. 2 teens in Hoa t-shirts dragging a foam machine across the sand. I yelled from the deck. They ran, abandoning the equipment like smugglers caught on the beachhead. I called the police. They sent an officer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "This sounds like a civil matter," he mumbled, scribbling lazily into his notebook. I handed him the camera footage. He barely glanced at it. "We'll write a report," he said. Before disappearing into the night, I called my lawyer the next morning. Maria Nguyen, sharp, unflinching. She told me 2 things. "You're right. This is illegal, and you're about to be very unpopular." On July 3rd, it began. Karen's army arrived in pickup trucks and convertibles. Teenagers in Hoa t-shirts carried crates of glow sticks. A stage was being erected, yes, a literal wooden stage on my dune. I marched down with my property deed in hand and told the man in charge they were trespassing. He smirked. "We have a permit," he said, waving the document that looked suspiciously like it had been printed from Microsoft Word. Comic Sans. I kid you not. I called the police again. They sent the same officer. He shrugged. "They say they have a permit. Not much I can do." That night the beach exploded in sound. Thumping bass, screams, laughter. The air smelled like sunscreen and battery acid. Lights strobed across the sky and chemical foam poured from the machine like industrial snow. The music rattled our windows. I filmed from the deck. My wife cried. The turtles never came. And then the rain started. Not like rain. A storm. One of those summer tantrums that hurls buckets from the sky and howls like something ancient. The foam mixed with rainwater and created a sludge. The partiers screamed in delight. They danced in it, rolled in it, trampled the dune line, and in the middle of it all the red rope we'd placed around a loggerhead nest collapsed. I saw it happen in real time. The crowd swarmed blind to anything but the music. The nest disappeared under fluorescent feet. My hands shook as I filmed. Somewhere in the chaos, I saw Karen laughing, champagne in hand. She hugged someone, then leaned in close and slipped a thick envelope into a uniformed officer's palm. That was the moment I knew I wasn't just fighting a rogue hold president. I was up against a system that had already decided the truth didn't matter. Only the party did, and I wasn't invited. At 3 a.m., as the last bass thudded into silence and the storm swept the foam out to sea, I stood alone at the edge of my property. The dune was flattened, trash sparkled in the sand, the nest was gone, but the cameras were still rolling. And deep in the bushes, the teenage boy I didn't know, Leo, from 3 doors down, was filming with his phone. He looked at me and whispered, "I got it. All of it." I didn't know it then, but Leo would become my ally, my witness, my proof. And Karen Gilbert had just made her last mistake. The foam wasn't light and fluffy. It was chemical. It stung when it hit your skin, smelled like a battery factory wrapped in a vanilla candle. And when it pulled in the wrong places, it turned the sand a sick shade of gray. But that wasn't the part that made me nauseous. It was what the foam swallowed the nest, the loggerhead turtle nest. We had roped it off days earlier, marked it with the proper signs, flagged it with high visibility poles. My wife even added laminated notes begging people to tread carefully. Karen knew. Everyone in the neighborhood knew. But when the music hit and the machines fired up, none of it mattered. The party swallowed the dune like a tide of neon nihilism. And the nest, silent, fragile, forgotten, was just collateral damage to them. What happened that night shouldn't have been possible, not in a country with laws, not in a town with decency. But when power meets apathy, it breeds impunity. And that night, impunity danced under strobe lights on my land. At first, I stayed on the deck, watching through the telephoto lens, documenting everything. Leo, the kid from down the block, was crouched beside the dune with his phone out, catching close-ups. We weren't just filming, we were preserving evidence. But when the storm rolled in, everything changed. The clouds shifted low and fast, like something was chasing them. Thunder cracked above the DJ booth. The foam, already spilling over, began to react with the rain thickening, spreading faster, more aggressive. The teenagers screamed with delight, thinking it was part of the show. A few adults tried to wrangle them back, but it was too late. The dance floor had become a chemical swamp. The edge of the dune, usually protected by both law and topography, was now indistinguishable from the chaos. People stomped everywhere. And in the center of that madness, I saw it, a foot, a bare foot, coated in phosphorescent slime, coming down hard on the exact spot where the nest had been. My stomach turned. I shouted. I yelled from the deck, tried waving a flashlight. No one looked. The music roared over me like a freight train. And then came the second wave, not of rain, but of drunks. A group pushed toward the foam. One of them tripped, fell face first into the sand, flailed, and laughed. Another dropped a drink. The cup rolled toward the nesting area. I couldn't breathe. I ran back inside, grabbed the old handheld spotlight we kept for hurricanes, turned it on and aimed it directly at the beach. The beam cut through the dark like a searchlight in a war zone. A few people shielded their eyes. One man flipped me off. And then I saw her, Karen, emerging from the DJ canopy like a movie villain revealed in Act 2. Her hair soaked, glitter smeared across her blazer, holding a wine glass like it was a scepter. She walked up to the foam machine operator and gestured to turn the lights toward the dune, my dune, as if she wanted to reclaim it with spectacle. That was when Leo stepped onto the scene, camera still rolling. He stood on the edge of the dune like some teenage vigilante, shouting over the music, "This is illegal. This is private property." Karen heard him. She walked straight up to him, pointed, and said something I couldn't hear. Leo didn't flinch. He kept recording. One of the guests grabbed his shoulder, maybe trying to stop him, but Leo ducked out and vanished into the dark. A moment later, I got a text. A blurry photo, a uniformed officer holding a manila envelope, Karen's hand still outstretched. The caption read, "This just happened." That was the moment the anger crystallized into something else: strategy. I wasn't just dealing with an out-of-control party. I was staring at the machinery of corruption in real time. The same officer who refused to take my complaint seriously was now being handed what looked suspiciously like a bribe. The gears were turning, and I was the grit in their teeth. Around 2:00 a.m., the rain intensified. The DJ tried to play through it. He actually yelled, "Let's get wet," but equipment began to short-circuit. Sparks flew. The lights blinked. Some people screamed, not with delight this time, but with panic. I watched as guests scrambled toward their cars, some slipping in foam, others pulling off shoes ruined by the sludge. The foam machine sputtered and died. In the chaos, Karen disappeared. Her pink visor lay abandoned in the sand like a crown knocked off in battle. I waited. I filmed. I took photos of the nest, or what was left of it. At dawn, the rain stopped. The sky bled into gray and blue, heavy with silence. The beach looked like a battlefield. Empty cups, crushed cans, glow sticks snapped and bled out like dying fireflies. My dune, no, the dune was trampled flat. The roped-off section was a muddy crater. There were no turtle tracks, no signs of life, only plastic footprints, and the ghost of music still ringing in my ears. I walked the perimeter, took 143 photos from every angle. I sent them to Maria. She replied within minutes, "This is good. Now we build the case." But the next shock came later that morning. A new email from the Hoa, "Dear residents," it began. "We are thrilled to report that last night's glow on the beach was a success beyond expectations. Community turnout was amazing, and we are grateful for your support in reclaiming the beachfront as a shared space. Special thanks to our local authorities for ensuring a safe and joyful event. We look forward to more events like this in the future. Sincerely, Karen Gilbert." Reclaiming the beachfront, my beachfront. I felt heat rise in my chest. She was rewriting reality, gaslighting the entire neighborhood. She made it sound like I donated the land, like it had always been public. That afternoon, 2 men showed up in reflective vests. They carried surveying tools. I approached them. "What are you doing?" I asked. One replied, "Redrawing property lines, sir." "Whole request." I held up my deed. "This land is mine." He shrugged. "You'll need to speak with your board." Your board? As if they own me now. As if property, evidence, and state ordinances could be waved away with a newsletter and a foam machine. That night, I didn't sleep. I reviewed every file, every timestamp, every angle. Leo sent over his footage. It was gold. Close-ups of the nest before and after, Karen laughing, the bribe, the chaos. And in one perfect shot, Karen stepping over the rope and stomping straight into the protected zone, glass in hand, eyes wild. I sent everything to Maria. Her reply came at 2:34 a.m. "We have enough. It's time to go nuclear." The next morning, I filed an official complaint with the State Environmental Agency. I submitted evidence to the Department of Natural Resources. Maria drafted a cease and desist letter to the HOA, and I posted the footage online. No commentary, just facts. This happened on my land, the caption read. It went viral. Within 48 hours, local news picked it up. The headline: Private Beach Rave Destroys Turtle Nest. HOA under fire. Karen responded with another email. This one was shorter, colder, due to recent defamatory content circulated without context. We are pausing all community events. Legal action is being considered. Regards, Karen. But the damage was done. The tide was turning, and the foam, that poisonous, synthetic joy she sprayed across the dune, was dissolving into something else. Proof. The foam wasn't light and fluffy, it was chemical, aggressive, almost alive in the way it moved, expanding faster than the music could control it, swallowing the beach in sudsy madness. And beneath that glowing mess was something irreplaceable, something ancient, something small and quiet that had no chance of surviving the chaos. A loggerhead turtle nest, weeks away from hatching, obliterated under drunken feet and strobes of ultraviolet light. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that something smelled wrong, like burnt plastic mixed with cheap vanilla air freshener, and that the rumbling I heard wasn't just bass from the DJ booth but the real storm rolling in, one with thunder, wind, and the kind of wrath no HOA could bribe. It started with the foam machine shorting out, an electrical spark followed by a scream, and then laughter, because no one thought it was serious, not until the rain came. And when it came fast, sudden, and sideways, like the sky had been waiting to punch this party in the throat. I was on the deck, camera rolling, flashlight aimed, my wife inside crying softly into a towel because she couldn't bear to see what they were doing to our land, to our home, to the thing we had protected for 31 years. I had warned them, emailed, printed maps, spoken at the last HOA meeting where Karen, in her neon scarf and fake pearls, had smiled and nodded while clearly planning to ignore every word I said. She thought she was untouchable. But that night, as the rain soaked the dance floor and turned the sand into sludge, I saw something else. I saw fear flicker in her eyes, just for a moment, just long enough to know she was realizing things were out of her control. The foam was supposed to stay contained, a dramatic centerpiece of her glow on the beach fantasy, but now it was overflowing, dragging plastic cups and glow sticks toward the fragile dune line. The same dune I had roped off days earlier with signs warning of active turtle nests. People danced through it anyway. They didn't care. Most didn't even see the signs. Or if they did, they thought it was a joke, some echo vibe Karen had added for aesthetic. But I saw it. I saw the yellow rope collapse. I saw the footprints scatter across the marked perimeter. I saw a girl in heels sink and laugh, and kick sand into the air. And then I saw her crushed shell, not a full turtle, not a body, just the corner of something delicate and white jutting from the sludge like a fragment of bone. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't make a sound. That was the moment I knew I had to leave the deck. I ran down, barefoot, slipping on the wet wooden stairs, camera in one hand, the other clutching the side rail as thunder exploded above me like a final warning. Leo was already there, hiding near the brush line, his hoodie soaked, phone steady, filming everything. He nodded at me, then pointed. "She's paying him," he said. I followed his finger, and there it was, Karen, under the canopy, handing a folded envelope to the same police officer who had told me last week that property disputes aren't really our priority right now. She smiled as he tucked the envelope inside his jacket, then toasted him with her wine glass like it was some kind of unspoken agreement between criminals. I filmed that too, every second. I wanted to believe maybe it was a thank you card. Maybe it was something innocent. Maybe I was seeing shadows where there were none. But then he walked away without stopping the party, without checking the permits, without acknowledging the phone crawling over the sea oats, and I knew. The system had chosen a side, and it wasn't mine. That realization didn't make me angry, it made me calm, a dangerous, focused kind of calm, like standing in a burning room and suddenly noticing the fire has a rhythm. I turned back to Leo. "You still filming?" He nodded. "Don't stop," I said. The storm got worse. Power flickered. The DJ kept yelling into a mic that had stopped transmitting. The lights blinked off, then on again, then off for good, in the darkness. The beach turned primal, just shadows and flashes of lightning, foam like mist, people slipping, grabbing at each other, no music, only shouting. That's when the panic started. Someone screamed that they'd lost a phone, another shouted for their kid. One woman tripped on the extension cord and went down hard. A guy slipped face first into the foam and didn't come up right away. The party turned. What had been Karen's masterpiece was now collapsing in real time. And then she vanished, just like that. No goodbye, no speech, no cleanup crew. She disappeared, probably into one of the SUVs now fishtailing down the sand road toward the HOA pavilion. The music never came back. By 300 a.m., the beach was empty, a battlefield of plastic, broken glass, tangled cords, and foam melting into puddles of gray. I walked the perimeter again, camera still rolling. My wife had joined me, silent, holding a flashlight that flickered every few steps. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The dune was unrecognizable, flattened, ripped. The protective grasses had been trampled, and the marked nesting area was just gone. The rope lay in the mud. The signs were shattered. I took photos. Leo took photos. He sent me his clips, long, unbroken shots of the crowd storming the nest zone, of Karen cheering near the DJ booth, of her glassy-eyed as the foam overtook the boardwalk steps. But the real gold was the envelope the moment it passed from her hand to the officers, caught from two angles, under perfect lighting, framed like a courtroom exhibit waiting to happen. I didn't sleep that night. I uploaded everything, backed it up twice. Then I wrote a letter to the Department of Environmental Protection, then another to the State Wildlife Commission, then another to the HOA, though I knew Karen would delete it. By 700 a.m., the storm had passed. The sky was clean and hollow. The beach looked post-apocalyptic. I went out with gloves and trash bags and picked up what I could. People walked by and said nothing. Some avoided my eyes. One old woman whispered, "I didn't know she'd do all this." I nodded but said nothing. Around noon, Leo stopped by with a USB. "Full footage," he said. "Every minute. I want her gone." I looked at him, this kid who didn't owe me anything, who risked getting shoved, sued, silenced, and I realized something. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It had become collective. It had weight. That afternoon, a NOHOA newsletter arrived. "Thank you for the incredible turnout," it read. "Glow on the Beach was a resounding success. Thanks to all who helped us reclaim our shared space. Future events pending HOA approval." I laughed out loud. Shared space. That was the new lie. That she'd done it for us. That the beach belonged to the community now. But the deed was in my safe. The turtle eggs were dead, and the foam still burned my hands when I picked up trash. That night, Maria, my lawyer, called me. I told her everything, sent every file. She listened without interruption. Then she said 5 words: "She just gave us everything." I didn't know what that meant exactly. Not yet. But I knew Karen Gilbert had made a mistake. A big one. And now we had proof. Not hearsay. Not emotion. Not outrage. Proof. And if the law still meant anything, that proof was going to burn brighter than any foam machine ever could. They called it sand hoarding, as if peace was a crime, as if protecting your land made you selfish, as if 31 years of stewardship meant nothing compared to Karen Gilbert's vision of community. That was the phrase they used in the new HOA memo. An actual, printed, professionally typeset letter slipped into everyone's mailbox like some kind of propaganda leaflet in light of recent tensions. The HOA will be proposing an emergency rezoning to prevent sand hoarding and ensure equitable beach access for all residents. Equitable beach access. They made it sound like I'd fenced off a water source in the desert instead of drawing a line around a federally protected dune on private land. And it didn't stop there. The very next morning, I woke to the sound of heavy engines. Not 1, not 2, but 3 bulldozers, crawling up the beach like slow yellow monsters. escorted by 2 pickup trucks and a man in a reflective vest holding a clipboard and a coffee like he was directing a movie called How to Ruin a Habitat. In 90 minutes, I stormed outside, barely dressed, and waved my deed like a maniac. "This is private property," I shouted. "Turn around." The guy squinted at me like I was a language. He didn't speak. "We're clearing space for the community deck," he said, flipping a page on his clipboard. "Approved by HOA. You can take it up with Karen." Karen again, always Karen. I told him this land was not HOA jurisdiction, that I had environmental protection status, that there were turtle nests here. He shrugged. "I just run the machine." I called the police. Again, a different officer showed up this time. He listened a little longer, asked a few more questions, but when he radioed dispatch and came back, his tone shifted. "According to the zoning map on file," he said carefully, "this land falls under shared coastal maintenance. You'll need to dispute it through civil court." That was the moment it hit me. Karen had filed new maps, fake ones. She hadn't just trespassed, or bribed, or partied her way across the law. She was now altering the very paperwork that defined what land was what, who owned what, and who could build where. I backed off. I filmed. I recorded everything: the bulldozers chewing up native grass, the flags being staked where my property line used to be, the noise, the arrogance, the sheer madness of it. I sent the footage to Maria. She called me back with a voice like steel. "It's time to escalate," she said. That evening, I met with Brenda Ruiz from the county planning office. She'd gotten wind of the new maps. She was furious. "First red flag," she said, pulling out a printed version of the HOA as proposed zoning map. "This font." She pointed at the label over my land, Comic Sans. "That's not even legal on government documents. This wasn't approved. It wasn't submitted. It wasn't even reviewed. It's a forgery. A forgery." I felt like vomiting. They were forging official documents to steal a dune. Brenda promised to issue a freeze on all changes and flagged the incident to the state planning board. Meanwhile, Maria had filed a temporary restraining order against the HOA, preventing further construction or alteration of the dune. It should have ended there, but it didn't, because Karen wasn't finished, not by a long shot. She showed up the next day at my front gate, flanked by 2 HOA board members and a guy in a suit who claimed to be a real estate attorney. They handed me a letter, an ultimatum disguised as diplomacy. The HOA, it read, "is willing to forgive recent hostilities and offer a solution that benefits all parties. If you agree to remove all personal obstructions and allow temporary community access to the dune, we will forego further legal action regarding your alleged land encroachment." Alleged, that word, it made something in me snap. I told them no, not just no, but hell no. Karen smiled. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said, her voice syrupy with threat. "You could be remembered as the man who united this neighborhood or the one who sued his neighbors over a pile of sand." I laughed. "It's not sand," I said. "It's a nesting ground. It's wildlife. It's law. And it's mine." She left in silence. The suit didn't. "We'll be in touch," he said, handing me a business card printed on paper too expensive for someone telling lies. That night, I climbed onto my deck with the drone remote. I'd bought a new Model 4K camera, thermal imaging, night vision. I flew it over the dune, circled the new stakes, zoomed in on the fresh tire tracks, then hovered over the HOA pavilion where, through a window, I caught sight of Karen pacing, talking, gesturing wildly. She wasn't in control anymore. She was flailing. The restraining order had slowed her. Brenda's investigation had cornered her. And Leo, God bless Leo, had just finished stitching together a supercut of all the footage we'd taken: the party, the phone, the envelope, the bulldozers, the fake map. He even added subtitles. We uploaded it to every local Facebook group, tagged the city council, emailed every journalist from the local paper to the regional environmental blog. And then we waited. It took less than 24 hours. The news ran the headline: HOA accused of land theft and ecological destruction. Dune owner fights back. Comments exploded. Karen's supporters vanished. Neighbors who'd once rolled their eyes at me now brought over coffee, offers of help, even handwritten notes that said, "We're with you." But the real blow came from an unexpected place. Arthur Bell, the Hoa treasurer, a man so old his hearing aids had hearing aids. He knocked on my door and handed me a manila envelope. "I kept copies," he said, "of everything, in case she went too far." Inside were receipts, invoices, spreadsheets, names of companies that didn't exist, payments for community events that were never held, transfers from the Hoa account to a shell corporation, one registered under Karen's maiden name. It wasn't just a lie anymore. It was fraud. Real, prosecutable fraud. Maria nearly wept when she saw it. "She's cooked," she said. "And this is going to court." But we didn't wait. We sent the files to the press, to the state attorney's office, to the Department of Justice. We gave everything, and in doing so, we flipped the story. I wasn't the grumpy old man hoarding sand anymore. I was the homeowner who stood up to a machine, the man who filmed, who fought, who proved it. And Karen, she wasn't the Hoa president with big dreams. She was the embezzler who threw a rave over a turtle graveyard and thought no one would notice. The dune stood quiet that night, no lights, no music, just wind and the faint outline of a new turtle nest, marked carefully, waiting in silence. I sat on the deck with a beer, watching the stars, knowing Chapter 4 would bring the fight to the courtroom, but that Chapter 3 had ended with something stronger than rage: momentum. Justice isn't something you're given, it's something you have to build brick by brutal brick, knowing the people you're up against have power, money, and friends in the right places, but also knowing that none of that can outlast truth when it's well documented and sharpened like a blade. The moment I saw Officer Ramirez step onto my property, I knew the tide had turned, not because he walked differently or wore some special badge, but because he truly looked at the dune like it mattered. He knelt down, brushed aside a line of crushed oats with his gloved hand, and whistled low under his breath. "That rope was real," he said. "That perimeter was marked." It was the first time any official had spoken about the nest like it was something sacred, and not just a pile of sand in the way of Hoa dreams. I showed him the footage, Leo's clips, the time-stamped stills, the thermal drone images showing heat signatures where the nests had once been. Ramirez didn't ask dumb questions. He just nodded, took notes, and asked if I still had the original zoning documents. I did. He asked if I had a copy of Karen's fake map. I had that too. He left with a folder so thick it looked like a case file for a murder trial. And in a way, it was. Only the victim had a shell and never had a chance to scream. That same afternoon, Brenda from the planning department sent an official letter freezing all Hoa development permits pending investigation. Karen tried to push back, claimed it was harassment, claimed I was orchestrating the smear campaign, but her tone had changed. The rage was still there, but now it was laced with panic, like a queen who just realized her castle was built on borrowed land. At the emergency Hoa meeting the next night, I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The room was packed, not with the usual echo chamber of Karen's loyalists, but with real neighbors, retirees, young couples, a woman holding her toddler, even teens like Leo. And they weren't quiet. "Why did you lie about the map?" one man shouted. "Where's the money?" another barked. Karen banged the gavel so hard the handle snapped. "This meeting is out of order," she shrieked. "We're not here to discuss slander." But someone had already placed a printed spreadsheet on the table, Arthur's spreadsheet, the one that showed tens of thousands missing, redirected to Coastal Outreach LLC, a company registered to a P.O. box in her maiden name, in a city she hadn't lived in for a decade. She tried to deny it, claimed she was framed, but the paper didn't lie. And neither did Arthur, who stood slowly from his seat in the back, cane in one hand, folder in the other. "I loved this neighborhood," he said, voice trembling, "and I trusted her. We all did, but trust without transparency is just an invitation for theft." Someone clapped, then another, then the whole room erupted. Karen fled before the vote to suspend her. The very next day, a subpoena arrived on her doorstep. A formal criminal investigation had begun. Fraud, embezzlement, environmental violations, falsification of zoning documents, obstruction. But even that didn't prepare me for what came next. I was walking the perimeter again, camera in hand, documenting new turtle tracks, yes, a new nest. A miracle considering the devastation, when I noticed something glinting near the flattened portion of dune, a metal rod. Buried, I pulled at it, and out came a small, rusted stake with an orange tag labeled KGI Surveying. I didn't know what it meant, but Leo did. "That's a stake from a private land surveyor," he said, showing me the website. "Karen used this firm on another property 2 years ago, same company that made the map for the pavilion." We dug up for more stakes. They weren't placed in a legal grid. They were scattered sloppy fast, like someone had tried to redraw boundaries overnight with no precision, just the illusion of legitimacy. We sent the photos to Brenda. She responded within an hour. These weren't in the county record. She planted them. That was the final nail. Brenda filed a formal statement with the state. Maria added it to our growing case file. The press picked up the new angle. Hoa president accused of planting fake survey stakes to seize protected land. Karen went silent. No newsletters, no emails, no pink visor, just silence, until she made her last mistake. Maybe it was desperation, maybe arrogance, maybe she truly believed she could still spin the narrative. But that Friday, at 9:13 a.m., she called a press conference on the HOA pavilion steps. Microphones, cameras, local news. She wore all white, said it was a symbol of transparency. What followed was 15 minutes of rambling, gaslighting, and crocodile tears. She claimed the spreadsheet was forged, that the phone party was misunderstood, that the turtle nest was never conclusively proven to exist. But then, God bless live broadcasts, she snapped. A reporter. "What about the bribe caught on camera?" Karen's eyes narrowed. She hissed into the mic. "That wasn't a bribe. That was a thank you." The reporter blinked. "Thank you for what?" "Exactly." And Karen, this woman, who had ruled our whole like a miniature dictator, looked straight into the lens and said, "For knowing when to look the other way." That was it. That was the moment. The confession, if not in legal terms, then in the only one that mattered: public perception. The news ran it on loop. Maria clipped it into our final brief. The officer from the video, already under internal review, turned whistleblower within 48 hours. Said he'd been paid. Said others had too. Said Karen used Hoa funds as her personal war chest. The story went statewide, then national. Hoa corruption wasn't new, but this level: bribes, environmental damage, forged documents. This was juicy. I started getting calls from journalists, lawyers, even a documentary team. I declined all interviews. This wasn't about fame. It was about restoration, about making something whole again. That night, I walked the dune. The new nest was intact. I stood still, letting the wind carry the ocean back into the hollow space Karen had tried to fill with noise and power. The foam was gone. The stakes were gone. The community was quiet again. But this quiet was different. It wasn't apathy. It was vigilance. Karen would face charges. The whole would be restructured. But more importantly, people had seen. They'd witnessed what happens when one person stands their ground, not with fists or fire, but with documentation, truth, and relentless, maddening patience. Justice wasn't given. We built it together. The courtroom didn't smell like justice. It smelled like disinfectant and quiet dread. Like every stale argument that had ever been reduced to paperwork and fluorescent lighting. And as I sat there watching Karen Gilbert take the stand, pearls still perfectly looped around her throat like they were holding her lies in place, I couldn't stop thinking about the turtles. Not the ones she crushed, but the ones that came back, because they did, against everything. 2 weeks after the storm, after the phone, after the media circus, and the interviews I kept turning down, they returned, small tracks first, delicate, deliberate, a silent procession up the newly protected dune under a sliver of moonlight. Leo spotted them, texted me a photo with no words, just a single glowing dot in the dark, life returning. But before that moment, Before the healing began, there was the reckoning. Karen's trial wasn't just about me or the dune. It had become a symbol. Neighbors who had never said my name now shook my hand. Strangers donated to the legal fund Maria set up, though I never asked for one. Environmental activists picketed outside the courthouse with signs that read "Justice for the Dune" and "Not your sandpit." Karen, the irony was, Karen still believed she could win, even as the evidence stacked like bricks around her. The fake invoices, the forged survey maps, the footage. Karen stepping over the rope turtle nest in heels. Karen handing the envelope to the officer. Karen saying, "Live on air." That was a thank you for knowing when to look the other way. The prosecutors didn't even need to embellish. They just hit play. Maria and I sat shoulder to shoulder every day. She whispered sharp things when Karen's lawyer tried to deflect that I was petty, that the turtle nest was alleged, that community vibrancy sometimes requires sacrifices, but every time they said the word sacrifice, I pictured the cracked show, the broken dune grass, the quiet my wife and I used to sit in. Maria cross-examined like a surgeon. No wasted motion, no showmanship, just cuts clean, deep, and irreversible. She brought up the whole bank statements, the dummy LLCs, the construction permits that didn't exist. Then came Arthur walking slowly to the witness stand, papers trembling in his liver-spotted hands, but voice clear as day when he said, "We trusted her. She called it community, but it was theft." Leo testified next. 18 by then, taller, more serious. He brought the room to silence when he played the clip from his phone the moment Karen laughed as the foam buried the nest. No commentary, just her face. The jury didn't flinch. Karen did. Her jaw tightened, her hands twitched, her lawyer leaned in, whispering damage control directly into her ear. But it was too late. The footage was already burned into every screen from here to Tallahassee. The trial lasted 10 days. On the 11th, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts: fraud, environmental destruction, filing false legal documents, misuse of community funds, and obstruction of a state investigation. The judge didn't smile. He didn't grandstand. He simply said, "You were given trust. You weaponized it. That ends today." Karen was sentenced to 6 years. Not all of it would be served, we knew that. But the record would follow her. She wouldn't hold another position of power. Her name would forever be associated with arrogance, deceit, and the sound of crushed shells beneath rented speakers. After sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse and didn't say a word to the cameras, but I did smile. Just once, because justice doesn't need a microphone. It needs memory. And we had plenty. In the months that followed, the community changed not just on paper, not just in leadership, but in tone. People spoke to each other, volunteered, planted new dune grass by hand. We installed small wooden signs carved by a retired vet down the road: "Watch for nests. Respect the sand." The HOA was rebuilt from the ground up. Brenda joined the oversight committee. Arthur took on the treasurer role again. And Leo, he became the first youth liaison. His idea so that the next generation wouldn't just inherit land, but stewardship. On the 1-year anniversary of the Glow Party, we held a memorial not just for the turtles, but for what we almost lost. Not just a dune, a principle, a truth. That silence is not neutrality. That community is not control. That one voice, armed with proof and patience, can outlast the loudest machinery. And that's when they came back. In the dark. No music. No lights. Just the ocean whispering, and the soft shuffle of sand as small, ancient bodies returned to the place they had always called home. My wife cried. I held her hand. Leo filmed from a respectful distance. No phone. No fences. Just wind, water, and life. I never planned to be the center of anything. I never wanted to fight. I just wanted peace. But sometimes peace demands a fight. And if you're lucky, if you're really, then possibly lucky, you win not by destroying your enemy, but by proving they were never strong to begin with. Just loud. Just hollow. Just temporary. The dune is quiet now, not silent, but quiet in the way that matters. Birds sing, grass sways, turtles nest, and every now and then, someone new moves into the neighborhood. And here's a strange story about the time a homeowners association president tried to turn protected land into a nightclub and got taken down by a man with a camera, a kid with a phone, and a community that finally decided enough was enough. I don't correct the story, I just smile. Then I hand them a map, the real one.